Okay, king to g3 doesn't look like a threatening move, but whatever black does in response will end up as a checkmate. Okay, now this position, this little puzzle that I just showed you, I actually found it in a magazine, and this magazine is very old, well, quite old. It's a magazine from 1983. 1983 was about the time when I started looking at chess books and chess magazines and started looking at chess theory, okay, looking at top players' games. I used to go to my local library, and in my local library there was the British Chess magazine, and I used to look at it. And I'm in a chess shop at the present moment, and there are a load of books hanging around, and I found one of these magazines that I used to look at. A lot of people are asking me, what book should I get? What book should I get? What should I do? What chess program should I be getting? Really, lots of people are looking for new stuff, but there are some classic books and some classic programs and some classic ideas that really should be looked at. Stuff that's new, yeah, great. But if you don't learn of all the great strategies of the past, if you don't look at all those great players, your Capablancas, Alekines, Karpovs, Fishers, then you're not going to learn from all those great players that we had in the past. So learning from Magnus Carlsen, learning from Kramnik, learning from Anand is a great idea, but it's not everything. Okay, those guys learnt from the players who were the best players in the past as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to show you a few positions that I remember from this book, because one of the first tournaments I looked at was a chess Olympiad. Okay, and the chess Olympiad was in 1982. And I was quite excited at the time because it was the first time when England, the country I came from, actually thought they might actually do good in the tournament. Okay, they had a bunch of new grandmasters and they were expecting to do very, very well in the tournament. So we're going to start with a game. Okay, a game that happens, and actually it reminds me of another game. I'm pretty sure David will remember, will recognize the game from the way that it sort of ends. It starts from a completely different opening to the game I'm thinking of, which is one of the most famous games of all time, but the end of it is pretty similar to a very, very famous game. This game was played between an English grandmaster, he's black, Michael Steen, and a Russian grandmaster. Russia are the team to beat, and when England played Russia, they were near the top of the ladder in this tournament. So let's have a look at this game, okay? Michael Steen was white, and he opened, Michael Steen was black, and the guy who was white, actually, I had mixed loyalties here because he was my favorite player when I was like growing up. His name was Alexander Belyavsky, okay, and he played very, very classical chess. So he always liked to push e4 or d4, and he liked to play the e5 and the Spanish opening, and he liked to play the Queen's Gambit as black. So you never got any unusual openings from Mr. Belyavsky. You always got exactly the sort of main openings that you would expect, and that's the way he played, and he played them very, very well. I was lucky enough to play in the same tournament as him once in Amsterdam, and I was very, very happy about that. So it's a Sicilian, okay, that's the opening, and then Michael Steen, he wrote a book about this position, and this position is called the Najdorf, okay. It was a favorite opening of Bobby Fischer, and at the time when this game was played, which was 1982, it was a favorite opening of Kasparov. Okay, Belyavsky, and maybe Michael Steen made a bit of a mistake because Belyavsky had to play against Kasparov, okay, in a World Championship qualifier soon after this event happened. And so he prepared this opening for white. He knew loads and loads and loads about it. So he developed his bishop. He's going to try and castle queenside if he can. That's what he'd like to do. So he's moving the bishop out. He'd like to move his queen out. And if he can, he wants to castle. As you can see, black is definitely not going to castle over this side, or it's unlikely. This is where his safety zone is. So we're going to get castling on opposite sides of the board. And this is what makes the Sicilian so very exciting. Except Michael Steen came up with a slightly different plan, which we'll have a look at in a minute. Okay? He pushed his pawn there. That's okay. So it looks like his bishop's going to come in and block this pin. That's fine. And now this threatens this pawn to come up here, attacking the pin knight. So there are a whole load of things that black can do in this position. He can block, that would make a lot of sense. He can try and protect this square, maybe he can move his knight to here or here. Those would be sensible sorts of moves. Or he can do the move that he actually did. And this is a very, very tricky opening. He moved his queen out of the way. So now there's no pin. Okay, it looks fairly obvious. And it leads to one of the most interesting openings that there is. So white just moved his queen up, and now black's got a choice. Should I take this pawn or should I not take this pawn? So let's have a little show of hands. Should people take this pawn? In fact, just answer yes or no. Should black take on b2 or shouldn't they take on b2? So what do you guys think about that? I want to know. Yes, we already got a disagreement. Thomas says yes. Derek says no. Bridget says yes. Daniel says should. That's sort of getting towards yes. Yes, yes. No. No. Okay, well look, you guys are only just doing exactly what all the grandmasters in history are doing. You're arguing about whether this pawn should be taken or not. It's called a poison pawn, okay? And the idea is this. There are a few of these sorts of openings that you can play, and the idea is this, that you take the pawn and you accept that you're going to get attacked because your opponent's going to be able to develop much quicker than you, okay? And you're going to have to defend, but you're going to be a pawn ahead. So if you take the pawn, you've got to play for an endgame. If you're white in this position and your opponent takes, then you lost a pawn. So that's not good, but you're going to have a massive development advantage. Your opponent's queen's going to be on the wrong end of the board. So you've got a couple of things that you can try and do. You can try and attack your opponent's king by using your developed pieces. You can even try and trap the queen. Okay? So that's the whole idea of this opening. And Michael Steen, who was an absolute expert at this opening, took. Okay? And let's see if you guys can predict what white's next move is. So what do you think white's going to do in this position? White's going to play, let me see, rook to b1, knight to a4, rook to b1. A few guesses. Rook to b1, I've got any more guesses? Rook to b1, knight to a4, I've got another rook to b1. Okay, rook to b1 is the main move in the position. Look, the queen also has to move again. And it is sneaking away. It can come up here and it can come back, but it's taking a lot of moves to do this. Okay? So, knight to a4, well, you've got to be a bit careful because your rook is attacked. Okay? So you've got to make sure that you don't lose material in this position. The move that Alexander Beliavsky played was a little bit of a strange one, but I guess you can understand. Okay? He brought his knight back to b3, which blocks the queen's retreat. And this queen now is in a bit of a, well, it's a bit of a dangerous situation. And in fact, he would like to sort of, if he could, he would like to castle. Okay? He would like to play a3, and then he'd like to trap the queen. Okay? So black does have to be careful about this sort of stuff. Knight to b3 at the time wasn't considered a particularly dangerous move. Nowadays, it's considered the best move for white. So maybe Alexander Beliavsky was 30 years ahead of his time. Okay? Michael Steen didn't know so much about this knight b3 move. Everyone was playing rook to b1 like most of you guys have guessed. Okay? So, he brought his knight to d7, not a great move. Alright? He hasn't really, he's not really developing very well on this. His queen not getting into the game, and white just develops his bishop, carrying on with his plan. He just wants to castle, okay, and trap this queen. So now black brought his pawn down to here. He's still not really helping his king get out. I guess king get to safety, not helping his queen getting out. I guess he's got a few options. It's quite a difficult position. Maybe he can try and bring his bishop and try and develop that. Maybe he can play b4 and try and break his queen out that way. All right, white, once again, not worried about it whatsoever and just castles. Okay? So let's just look at this position. This position is a fairly classical type of game. Black has not developed, but he's a pawn ahead. If he can, I guess if he can get to an endgame, if he can sort of like avoid any attacks that are going to come through the middle of the board, then I reckon he's going to be probably good in the endgame because he's a pawn ahead. White, on the other hand, has to use his development advantage. White has connected both of his rooks. Okay, he's got all of his minor pieces developed, and his queen is ready to move to a better spot as well. Black, on the other hand, hasn't moved either bishop yet, hasn't moved either rook. The king's not anywhere near getting to safety, and his queen is also going to have to do some sort of retreat to get back to where it looks safe. And I mean, it isn't easy because this b5 move now has really stopped this queen from sort of like going, if it goes back to this square and then goes back to that square, it's really got nowhere to go. Okay? So I'm going to have a little guessing game again now. What I want you to do is guess what you think black should play in this position. If you were black, what would you play in this position? It's difficult because you're trying to defend. We like b4. Thomas likes it so much he said twice. Very good. So you like pawn to b4. Okay, let's have a quick look at that. Pawn to b4. Okay, so Thomas, I'm just interested, if the knight goes to a4, what are you going to do in that position? Okay. b4, b4, b4. Daniel likes queen a3. Knight c5, a3, queen a3. Queen a3 in this position. Well, yeah, I guess it's got to go there, hasn't it? It's got to go to this position. Okay? It's got no choice but to go there. That's a pretty horrible place for a queen, isn't it? Okay? So, assuming that our knight doesn't get trapped, maybe our knight's getting trapped. Okay? So maybe you'll be able to get out of jail free. So maybe that'll be all right. Okay? b4. b4 was certainly one of the moves that was talked about. What else have we got? We've got knight c5 says Joe Flexmore. Okay? Knight c5. Knight c5 is a move that was played, I think. So let's have a look. Knight c5 is the move that was played. Okay, well, Joe, you got it. You got the move that the Grandmaster played. Okay? Knight c5 is an interesting sort of plan. Bringing your knight nearer to the center, trying to break your queen out of jail. Let's have a look what Alexander Beliavsky did to knight c5, because it actually turned out to be a pretty bad move. Okay? It was a pretty bad move because there's a very simple way of dealing with it. When you're behind in development, you shouldn't really be moving the same pieces more than once. So really, back in this position, I guess b4, trying to annoy this knight's a good move. But moves like bishop to b7, bishop to e7, trying to develop our pieces would be moves that would make a lot of sense. Knight to c5 is the move that was played. But when you really think about it, when you're behind in development, do you really want to be moving the same piece again and again? Okay, I guess you can swap. Let's have a look what happens. Alexander Beliavsky did swap. He took. And, of course, Michael Steen took back. And he took again. And he took back. And now, in this position, apparently those players who were watching the game started laughing. Okay? They started laughing because look at black's position. Just look at it. Okay? The last couple of moves have seen black's developed pieces disappear. So he's sitting in a position where he actually doesn't have anything developed except his queen, which is sitting in the very, very dangerous spot of b2. In fact, when we look at the move that the knight came to this square, it's actually stopping this queen from coming home. Even if the queen was to go to this square, it's struggling to get back. Imagine this knight wasn't here. I'm not sure how the queen can't go to there. It's a real struggle for it. Anyway, Alexander Belyavsky hit the queen, and obviously the queen's got to move. All right, what do you think he played in this position? So let's have white, who's now got a massive development advantage. What do you think white can play in this position here? If you were white, what would you play? So white to play in this position. Look at all your candidate options. Rook to b3, rook to b3, rook to b3, rook to b3. Okay, it's the first move we would think of, and the queen drops back. Okay, I'm sure Roberts asked you, bishop to b5, move knight. Bishop to b5, check. Okay, yeah, that's quite an interesting move. Move the knight, where do you want to move? Whoa. Oh, I see. Where do you want to move the knight to? Now, that's a very strange sort of thing happened there. Okay, hold on. Cool. All right, so where do you want to move the knight to? I like moving the knight, but where is it going to go? We've got Joe Flexmore's just said move the knight. Then the queen will almost be trapped. But where? D5? B5? Oh, we're in sacrifice mode, are we? If it goes to D5, okay, then I guess it's going to get taken. Can we trap the queen? Not quite. Okay, the queen will have A2, A4. We don't quite get it. B5 though, Thomas Morrison said let's go to B5. Knight takes B5. All right. Now, think back to when you were first learning the game of chess. Did anyone remember seeing the game between Paul Morphy when he was playing it in the Opera House against the two players, the Count Izuard and the Duke of Brunswick? Because when I first saw this, it reminded me so much of that game. It was absolutely exactly, well, almost exactly the same, the way that white just developed all of their pieces and then came out with a sacrifice of a knight on b5. In this position, black just looked at it and he resigned. He's losing so much material. If he moves his queen, then we've obviously just got knight to c7, check, picking up the rook. So I guess he would take the knight. So what are we going to play after that? So what are you playing after that? Bishop to b5. Yeah, thanks, Callum. It's not difficult now, is it? Bishop takes b5. Well, bishop there is not possible because queen takes his mate. So I guess I've got to move my king. And now, what do you want to do? How are we going to finish this one off? Rook to d1, Joe. Exactly. It's easy. You just put your rook there, and you're threatening mate on two different squares in this position. You're threatening mate on d6 and d8. And it's impossible to stop them both. You can only stop one. So this is mate, and that's mate. And it's impossible to stop both. So instead, Michael Steen basically just lost after 15 moves. Look, we go back to this position and very quickly go through it again. Black takes a pawn. White's fully developed. Black not helping his development at all. b5 makes a lot of sense if you play bishop to b7. Bishop to e7 is a sensible move. But moving a piece twice in the opening when you've not fully developed, no, I don't think so. I think you deserve to be punished. And this is so easy. Take those developed pieces. He's only got 2 knights that are out in the game. Now, it's White's entire army playing against a bunch of pawns. And you can even attack the queen in the meantime. And then, of course, we have this sacrifice because we're talking about 4 white pieces, even without the knight. 4 white pieces, 2 rooks, a bishop, and a queen playing against a king. No contest. Okay? Now look, the reason I showed you this game is because I saw this game in the same magazine as I just showed you that puzzle. It's amazing. It's like 30 years old, and yet there's all this really great material in it. This game is a fantastic game. I've learnt myself. I started playing this knight to b3 move. I started playing it a couple of years ago. So I know a little bit about this opening. I'd never seen this game before. Don't remember it. Here, have a look at this. This Olympiad, this tournament where England were doing so well, okay, they actually didn't end up doing so well in this one, but they did very well in the tournament afterwards. Let's have a look and see if you can see what White's going to play in this position. So it's White to play, and there were some amazing attacks, and there were some amazing, fantastic play at this particular Olympiad. So let's see if you can find how White attacked Black in this position. You see, Black's got himself in a bit of a bad situation. He's again mixed all his pieces up. Queen to h5. Whoa, queen to h5. Excellent. Where's the queen going after that? Not to a5. You don't want queen to h5. So queen to h5. Whoops. Queen to h5. I don't know where it's going after that. If only we had a light squared bishop, then yeah, that would be great. But we don't have any light square control. Light squared bishop's gone. Yeah, that's a shame. So, anything else? Knight to knight to h6. Let's sacrifice this knight. Okay, I like that idea. Knight to h6. So if he goes across there, we're just going to take the pawn. So I guess you've got to take, yeah? Take. And then what are we taking back with? Do you want to take back with the pawn? Do you want to take back with the queen? What are we going to take with? Pawn. We like pawn. And then we're opening up this diagonal, this file here. Oh, but hold on, can't he can just block it, can't he? There's no breaking through that. And then another defense is just to put your bishop here, and that guards that. No, that doesn't seem to work. No, maybe not. Oh, giving it away. Knight to g7. You guys were close. Okay, close. But let's see if you can see how he finishes off from here. So yes, sacrifice your knight. And then let's see if you can finish this one off. Because here, we sort of start with, there was no light square control. Now we're trying dark square control. So let's follow this up. Sorry, Thomas. G6, Queen H6. Let's see what else we've got. Queen H6 in this position. Lucas Salazar, Bishop D4, Queen H6, Queen H6. Okay. And the answer is Bishop to D4. Now, this is an unfortunate position for this black king. It's caught on dark squares. It's like a fianchetto, but it hasn't got its dark squared bishop where it should be. It's dark squared bishop over there. And the knight should really be on f6. And the rook should really be on f8. So these pieces are all mixed up. You know, you should really look at your opponent's pieces when you are in certain positions. And if they're not quite in the positions that you think they should be in, then maybe you should try and take advantage of it somehow. That's exactly what White was thinking in this position. He was thinking, well, that rook should be on f8, and that knight should be on f6, and that bishop should be on g7, but they're not. So, bishop to d4, king to g8. So how are we following that up? king to g8 is followed by, yes, Daniel, queen to h6. Threat and checkmate. It's not easy to stop that checkmate either, is it? I mean, if you play f6, then that will open up the g file after pawn takes, which is just as bad. Here's what he did. Knight to e6. Actually, that's a pretty good defense because it defends g7 and it attacks d4. So, let's see if we can find a way to carry on with the attack. Is there a way? Or has white completely blown it? We need more ammunition. Bishop and the queen have done as best as they could. Rook f7. Whoa! Rook f7. Let's have a look at that. Rook f7. That's threatening checkmate here and here. Great work, Callum, except you lose your rook. Cool. And now, is there a follow-up or isn't there a follow-up? Queen h7. Queen h7, yes. And then I guess the king's going to go back and queen h8 and back and back and back and back and back and back and back. Is that right? Yes. No. Lucas prefers rook f1. Actually, rook f1's pretty strong. It's got to be said. Let's look. Rook f1, and this game is going to be over pretty soon. Let's have a look at the options. Bishop here is option number 1, but I don't reckon that's very good after queen takes f6. And do we have a mate on this? Can anyone see a mate? Checkmate in 1 for me. Do we have it or not? Queen h8, thank you, Callum. You saw all that, didn't you, when you took on f7? Excellent. So, bishop f6 blocking, no good. So maybe we've got to move the king back. King back to g8, I guess. What happens now? Rook f8. I guess the rook would just take you to play rook f8. So we have another option. Look at all your options. Queen g7. Pawn to g6. Hey, you guys have sacrificed loads of stuff. Queen to e6. Thank you very much. Daniel, very good. Queens can go sideways, don't forget. Queen to e6. Checkmate. Okay? This bishop doing a wonderful job on the dark squares. Okay? This position was another game that happened at that Chess Olympiad. There's another game that I saw in this very scruffy looking magazine that's 30 years old. Wow, so much interesting information. Now, the question is, do we have time for one more? I guess we do. So let's have a look at one more of these. All right. This is a very famous looking sort of position. It's a typical sort of position. And let's see if you guys can work out what sort of sacrifice you might be able to do. If you've seen it before, then you might know about it. But if you haven't, then you might not. Good one to learn, though. Bishop h7. Joe Flexmore. What an excellent sort of sacrifice you're looking for. So you're looking at bishop takes f7. Bishop takes h7. The king comes and takes. And I guess your follow-up is queen to h5. And the king goes back. But now what? And bishop takes g7 in this position, or was that before? Before, okay? So what are we going to play in this position? Queen g5. Bishop g7 anyway, okay. Actually, this is an example of what's called a double bishop sacrifice. Bishop to g7, and if the king takes, we check. The king's got to go into the side somewhere, and we're going to lift up the rook, and on the next go, we're going to go over here and checkmate our opponent. A double bishop sacrifice. Okay? That's very, very cool indeed. So very well done, Joe. Callum, great work at getting the second bishop sacrifice. And the only thing is it doesn't quite work here. Okay? Let's have a look why. If you play bishop to h7 straight away, it's a mistake. Because after the king takes, queen check, the king goes back, the bishop takes. We've seen all this before. Oh, don't take the bishop. Remember, you don't have to take. f6. And now, if the bishop takes the rook, okay, I guess we can maybe take back again. I guess we can come and do check, or we can bring the rook over, and it's going to be two bishops for a rook. So check. And now, bishop takes. So what will happen if rook takes bishop? If the rook takes the bishop, what are you going to play? So imagine the rook's taking the bishop in this position. So rook takes bishop. What does white play in this position? Rook takes bishop. Yeah, you've all seen it. Queen h7, skewering the queen. So let's just go back a second to this. But you see the difference is in this position, black plays check. And then he's going to take this bishop, and then he's going to be a little bit of material ahead, two bishops for a rook. But you know, these players are pretty good. He saw that. He wanted it to happen. So he played this. Watch. He played castles. With the whole idea that he wants to play bishop here and take and do this double bishop sacrifice, but he doesn't want to allow queen e5 check, which we had in the last line. Pretty amazing stuff. Black should now be aware of that double bishop sacrifice. Black was a grandmaster, so he should have been aware of it. But he didn't. He wasn't. He played rook to d8. And now your sacrifice, Joe, well, actually it's not your sacrifice, it belongs to the second world champion, Emanuel Lasker, who played it first in the 1800s. Now it's played, so watch. Double bishop sacrifice. Doesn't happen very often. We've only had, like, in the history of the game over the last 150 years, we've only had like about 10 examples of it actually happening. Or we've actually had a few examples of it happening where it shouldn't have happened. So let's have a look at what happens if f6, because f6 wasn't played. Check. Takes. And now look, the queen can't get out the way of this skewer. So I don't know what he's going to play. He just gets skewered. But if he leaves the bishop there and tries to move the queen somewhere, I mean, where can the queen go? Here maybe? I don't know. It's a bit of a tricky one. Because it might be that if he goes here, we're just going to go there. And it looks like you can do this. But then you get checkmated yourself first. So there's the big difference between this position and the last position. That's how close one position is to another. And one difference, just that this side's castled, not the king in the center where it can be checked. All right. After bishop takes g7 in the game, black actually took. And the game finished off here. And now a check. And now rook to here. And seeing you can't stop, check, and then checkmate. Black very nicely resigned and allowed white his win with his two bishops sacrifice. Okay, you guys have done really great for me. Okay, this was the first position we saw, and this was the last position I was going to show you. However, this is a really, really, really tricky puzzle. If I'd have shown you this to start with, we'd have still been at it later on tonight. Okay? This position is a very, very interesting position that I also saw in this book. Now look, we're not going to solve it because we've only got about 2 minutes to go. However, what I do want to say to you is this. When you are trying to work out what you should be getting in the way of materials to work from, Okay? If you're thinking, oh, I could get a new book. Don't just think to yourself, what's the newest book that's out there? I want the newest book with the newest games. What you really want is a book that's got the best games in it. You see, we've learnt stuff here, double bishop sacrifices. We've learnt a strategy about not developing your pieces, okay? Not developing your pieces properly. That was in the Beliavsky versus Steen game, okay? We've learnt about quiet moves, moving your king instead of moving your queen to end up doing a checkmate. And we learned all this from a magazine that's 30 years old, okay? Now, you could get a new book and it could teach you lots of things. However, an older book with classic games by those great players such as Lasker, Alekhine, Capablanca, those great players of the past, Fischer, Spassky, Karpov, their games were still very great games. And we've got to learn from their strategies, because the top players nowadays are using the strategies of the past. Don't think to yourself that when you see someone doing a great bishop sacrifice, don't think to yourself, wow, that's amazing. They must be such an amazing player. No, they're not. They're learning that from games that happened in the past. They are coming out with some great new stuff as well. But before we learn all that great new stuff, we've got to remember that the top players today also are only as good as they are because they've learned from the top players of the past. Okay? So go out, get yourself some books. Christmas is a great time to get some books. And make sure you're getting the right sort of book. A book about the World Championship that's just happened, quite interesting. A book about Capablanca's best games, excellent. A book about how Carlsen's become a grandmaster, yeah, that would be interesting. A book about how Alekhine became world champion, yeah, that would be great. Okay? So learning from the past is really, really, really important. I just cannot stress that enough. Learn from today, but as I say, all of those great players of today, your Carlsens, your Anands, your Kramniks, they're only that good because they learned all of this stuff from the players before them. And that's what we've got to do as well. Okay? So I would like to say thank you very much for all you guys for coming out with all these amazing tricky moves tonight. So it was more tactical tonight than maybe Robert would normally do. But thank you very much for coming out with all these great ideas. Obviously, you're all a very great sacrificial and attacking bunch. So very, very well done indeed. Look for these strange moves. Think about the ideas that I've told you. And really, look at, I think the best example is this one actually. So we'll just go back. My favorite example is this example. If you just look at these three pieces, they're all in the wrong positions. So just look for what your opponents are doing. Okay, if they're putting their pieces in positions where they shouldn't really be, that knight should really be in front, and the bishop, well, it wants to be fianchettoed really. That way it will control the dark squares, and this rook really wants to be on f8 because there's an open file here, so it needs to be there. It's like he's castled in the wrong order. Okay? So look for these sorts of things in your games, and then you'll be able to take advantage of your opponent's bad piece positions. And please, please, please don't move pieces twice in the opening. Okay? I know that that's a beginner's mistake, but we saw a grandmaster doing it today. Cool. Thank you all very much for your participation. You'll have Robert back next week. It's now time to go and reflect upon some of the lessons that you've learned about tonight. So thank you very much, and I'll talk to you all again at some other stage in the future. Bye-bye.